Greetings. In this video I'm going to show you how to set up tunnel example L05. Using the business tunnel as configured in L05 will allow you to securely remote desktop to work from anywhere with internet access. Let's say that I'm traveling but I still need to remote desktop into a couple of servers on our main network at headquarters to perform some regular maintenance. These are items that I pretty much do on a daily basis. Since I have my laptop, I can use the Georgia SoftWorks business tunnel to tunnel into one of the servers and then RDP to the servers as needed. Since I'm going to be using the Wi-Fi at a hotel and a trade show, it is critical that I have a secure connection since I'm connecting to the main corporate network. Once I configure it, I can use the same configuration at other hotels and trade shows as well. In fact, anywhere I have access to the internet. The last time I was at a trade show, someone got my credit card info and purchased an expensive set of golf clubs. It won't happen this time. I will be using the business tunnel. Windows does provide some protection with RDP via encryption, yet the level of protection is questionable, especially since several major security vulnerabilities in RDP were exposed in 2012. You probably have heard about them. Encryption is good, but there is quite a difference between encryption and a security protocol. SSH is a security protocol, much more than just encryption. Many universities and companies no longer allow RDP from outside networks, and almost all security consultants recommend to avoid opening port 3389, which is the RDP port, to outside networks. You can avoid the fear and apprehension and can be confident in a secure, reliable connection when using the Georgia SoftWorks Business Tunnel. In this example, I will show you how to configure the Georgia SoftWorks Business Tunnel so you can RDP to headquarters from non-trusted locations. I will use the business tunnel to create a tunnel to an SSH server, which is in a secure location in the computer room at headquarters. Once the tunnel is created, I will create two channels, one to RDP to the computer Thomas and the other to RDP to the computer named Judges. So let's get down to business. You will need to know the IP address of the SSH server. If you don't know the IP address, you can just Google my IP from the computer with the SSH server and your public IP address will be displayed. Let's configure the tunnel. When we open up the business tunnel, we see the configuration summary page. Expand the configuration if it is not already expanded. You will see tunnels and local port usage. Click on tunnels. In the tunnels list section, click new. The first configuration section, SSH host info, specifies how to get to the SSH server. We need to give the tunnel a name, something recognizable. Since I'm creating a tunnel to the computer named Thomas, I will name it Secure Tunnel to Work -Thomas. For host, we'll put the IP address of the SSH server. If you have a router that forwards to the SSH server host, you would use the router IP address. The tunnel uses port 22, which is the default value. In the authentication section, we fill out the credentials to access the SSH server. On my SSH server, I use username password authentication, so I put that information there. The more detailed section of the tunnel setup lets you select the compression level, protocol, etc. The defaults are usually good, so I'll leave them alone. Make sure you have Enable this tunnel box checked. Click OK, and your tunnel is now configured. Now we will configure the first channel for the tunnel we just created. This channel will use RDP to the first server, Thomas. Select your tunnel for which you want to create a channel. Then under Channels list, click New. For the name, again, we want to pick something that is recognizable. We're using this channel to RDP to Thomas, so we will name it RDP to Thomas. We will select local forwarding type. The local address is set to the loopback address of my laptop. The local port number is an arbitrary port available on my laptop. Since the default RDP port is port 3389, I like to keep my arbitrary ports recognizable. I will add 10,000 to 3389, giving me 13,389. For the remote address, I use the IP address of the server to which I want to RDP. The internal IP address of Thomas is 192.168.1.124, so I will use that. For the remote port, I use the RDP port, which is port 3389. Make sure the channel is enabled and then click OK. Next, we will configure the second channel for the tunnel. This channel will be used to RDP to the second server, Judges. Select the tunnel for which you want to create a channel. Then under the channels list selection, click New. For the name again, we want to pick something that is recognizable. We're using this channel to RDP to Judges, so we will name it RDP to Judges. Again, we will select local forwarding type. The local address is set to the loopback address of my laptop. The local port number is an arbitrary available port on my laptop. Since the default RDP port is 3389, and as you know I like to keep my arbitrary ports recognizable, I will add 10,000 to 3389, giving me 13,389. However, I cannot use that port because I've already used it for the channel to Thomas. So I will add 1 to the port to give me 13,390. That will work. If I had a third server to RDP, I would use port 13,391 and so on for each additional server. For the remote address, I use the address of the server for which I want to RDP. The internal IP address of Judges is 192.168.1.149. For the remote port, I use the RDP port 3389. Since it's a different computer, I can still use its port 3389. Make sure the channel is enabled and then click OK. Now you will notice that the Activate button is clickable. We need to activate the configuration changes. Then we can click on Activity and then Channels and observe the tunnel and the channels we just configured. Everything will say 0 at this point because we haven't RDP'd yet. The last thing we need to do is configure RDP to connect using the tunnel. This is very easy. Open RDP. I do this by going to the Start button and type in MSTSC and pressing Enter. The RDP dialog opens. For the computer field, you want to enter the address and the port number that we configured in the channel configuration. We use the loopback address and the arbitrary port number we configured for each server. I'll enter 127.0.0.1:13389 to connect to Thomas, and I'll enter 127.0.0.1:13390 to connect to Judges. So let's RDP to Thomas. Enter the IP address and the port number and click Connect. I usually get a warning dialog about the identity of the computer, asking me if I want to connect anyway. Click Yes. The remote desktop connection opens, and I'm asked for a username and password to log onto the server Thomas. I enter the credentials, click OK, and I'm presented with the desktop of Thomas. Now I can work as needed. Now to RDP to Judges, I can run MSTSC from the Start button again. This time I enter 127.0.0.1:13390 and click Connect. I can have multiple RDP sessions opened at a time. The remote desktop connection opens and I'm asked for the username and the password to log on to the server Judges. I enter the credentials, click OK. I usually get a warning dialog about the identity of the computer asking me if I want to connect anyway. I click Yes. Now I have 2 RDP sessions using the tunnel that we just configured. We can be sure of this by going back to monitor the channel activity and seeing that the bytes downloaded and uploaded are incrementing. Now you can securely RDP from wherever you have internet access using the Georgia SoftWorks Business Tunnel. As long as the tunnel is enabled, anytime I RDP and use the address and ports I configured in the channel configuration, the tunnel is being used and I will have a secure connection. If the network connection drops and reconnects, the tunnel will automatically be reestablished. If I restart the laptop, the tunnel will automatically start and all RDP connections that use the tunnel will be secure. I can truly set it and forget it.